You know that thing where you apologize for having feelings? Not for doing something wrong, just for feeling something at all. Sorry, I don't want to make this a whole thing. Sorry, I know this is dumb. Sorry, forget it. If you've caught yourself saying something like that more times than you can count, there's a chance it didn't come from nowhere. There's a chance it came from somewhere very specific. And by the end of this, you're going to recognize exactly where. Picture this. A kid, let's call her Jess, comes home from school. Something happened. Maybe she got embarrassed in front of the whole class. Maybe a friend said something that cut deep. She walks in ready to talk about it. Her mom's having a bad day. Jess barely gets 2 sentences out before her mom says, "I really don't have the energy for this right now," and walks into the kitchen. Jess doesn't get mad. She just learns something, quietly, without anyone teaching it to her, on purpose. She learns that her feelings are an inconvenience, that the timing has to be right, that sometimes it's easier to just not bring things up at all. That lesson doesn't stay in childhood. It follows her into every relationship she has for the next 20 years. There's a psychologist named Lindsay Gibson who spent her career studying exactly this. What happens when a parent is physically present, even loving in their own way, but emotionally unequipped to actually show up for a child's inner world? She called it emotional immaturity. And it's not about bad parents. It's about parents who were never given the tools to handle emotions, their own or their kids. So they pass the gap forward without ever meaning to. Here's the thing that makes this hard to spot. Emotionally immature parenting rarely looks like a movie villain. No yelling necessarily. No obvious neglect. Often it looks like a totally normal household from the outside, which is exactly why so many people who grew up in one don't realize it until they're adults, staring down patterns they can't explain. So here are 5 signs, and you might recognize more of yourself in them than you expect. Sign 1, you became the emotional support for your parent, not the other way around. If you found yourself managing your parents' moods before you were even old enough to manage your own, checking their tone when you walked in a room, learning to read the temperature of the house before you said a word, that's a pattern researchers call parentification. Kids who grow up like this often become incredibly perceptive, incredibly responsible, way too fast, which sounds like a strength. And it is one. It's also exhausting because you spent your childhood doing a job that wasn't yours. Sign 2, your feelings were minimized, mocked, or redirected back onto you. You're too sensitive. Why are you making this such a big deal? I didn't even do anything. If your emotions were consistently met with defensiveness instead of curiosity, you likely learned to shrink them down before anyone else could. A lot of people carry this into adulthood as chronic self-doubt about their own reactions, constantly asking themselves, am I overreacting? Because as a kid, the answer was always yes, according to someone else. Sign 3, conversations about anything real got redirected, deflected, or shut down fast. Emotionally immature parents often can't tolerate discomfort, theirs or yours. So the second a conversation gets vulnerable, it gets steered somewhere safer. Changed subject. A joke. Sudden silence. If real talk in your house always seemed to slide off before it actually landed anywhere, that wasn't an accident. That was a nervous system protecting itself at your expense. Sign 4, you learn to predict moods instead of trusting stability. Some kids grow up knowing, generally, what to expect from their parents day to day. Other kids grow up as full-time weather forecasters, scanning tone of voice, body language, how the front door closed, to figure out which version of their parent they were about to deal with. If you developed that skill early, it wasn't a personality trait. It was survival. And it often turns into hypervigilance in adult relationships. reading a partner's slightly off text like it's a crime scene. Sign 5. Love in your house often felt conditional on being easy. Not spoken out loud usually, just felt. The version of you that didn't need much, didn't cause problems, didn't ask for too much, that version got the warmth. The version of you with needs, with big feelings, with actual problems that required actual effort, that version got a little less patience, a little more distance. If you learned early that being low maintenance was the price of connection, that lesson doesn't stay in childhood either. It shows up every time you hesitate to ask a partner or a friend for something you actually need. Here's the part that matters most, though. None of this means your parents were monsters. Most emotionally immature parents were themselves raised by emotionally immature parents. Nobody hands down a manual for handling a kid's feelings if nobody ever handed it to them first. This isn't about blame. It's about finally having language for a pattern that's been running quietly in the background of your relationships for years. And here's what actually changes once you can name it. Once Jess understood why she apologizes for having feelings, she could finally start doing something different, pausing before the automatic, sorry, forget it, and asking herself, wait, do I actually need to shrink this down right now? Sometimes the answer's still yes, because timing matters. But now it's a choice, not a reflex built when she was 7 years old, and just trying to keep the peace. So here's what I want you to sit with. If you recognize yourself in even one of these, that doesn't mean something is broken in you. It means you adapted exactly the way a kid is supposed to adapt to the environment they're given. The traits that helped you survive that house, the perceptiveness, the caution, the instinct to keep things smooth, they're not flaws. They're just tools built for a job that isn't yours to do anymore. You don't owe anyone an apology for having feelings. You never did, if this hit home. And if you want more of these breakdowns, subscribe to the channel. I genuinely appreciate it.